Well, here we are. I am so grateful, Victor, that
Mm.
you have decided to join me for this conversation today. Thank
Mm.
you. Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me. Glad to
Yeah.
be here.
I know I mentioned this to you when we had our first call together that, and I just want to bring her in of Tory, Capron,
Mhm.
and how I met you at Thanksgiving dinner at her house. I'm not sure how many years ago.
Many a year ago.
Many a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just want to presence her. The year of her death just passed. And for anyone who's listening, I think a lot of people do know Tory, and she was a really gifted therapist and shamanic practitioner and just a beloved being in the world who actually, upon her death, created a film called, I think, Only the Mountains Remain. And so I'm going to have that film in the show notes if anyone wants to take a look at that. But I just felt like, given that that's where we met,
Yeah.
I wanted to bring Tory in and just love you, Tory, wherever you are, flying free woman.
Welcome, Tory.
Yeah, welcome, Tor.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be really fun to open up because you have quite a provocative title of You're an Erotic ReWilder.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it would be really fun to just have you riff on that. Like, what exactly does that mean?
Oh, it's so boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything with erotic is not boring.
Right. Well, it's funny because people hear the word erotic and it evokes something almost automatically. And what it evokes almost automatically is sex and sexuality.
Right.
And that's not it's not necessarily inaccurate, but it's not the full thing. It's not the full picture.
Yes.
Yeah. And so so maybe I can break it down,
please,
a little bit. So I love words. And so I'll just start with the first word, which is erotic, which to me means it means life energy.
Yeah.
It means a quality of presence that has to do with life and engagement and curiosity and playfulness and feeling and all of that. And so that's big.
Yeah.
It's big. And so I like to contrast it with the word sex. So people go erotic sex. I'm like, erotic is a quality that can be brought to sex and sexuality. And it's also completely, the way I like to illustrate it is it's completely possible to have sex or sexual experiences that are not erotic.
Completely.
And I think people do it all the time, actually.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as soon as I say that, people go, oh yeah. Yeah, I get that. I've had a lot of experiences that were not erotic, but were very sexual. So that's it. But the erotic can be brought into a lot of different places as well. So I guess that's the first word. And I could talk a lot more about erotic and the definition, but that's good for now.
Great. Yes.
And so then the second word is rewilding. And rewilding, I mean, it's definitely a word that's like out there a lot right now. A lot of people tack it on to the beginning of things. And for me, rewilding, what it means to me is it's an acknowledgement that myself, you, pretty much everyone we know are humans that are living in domestication.
Yeah.
We are humans that have self-domesticated ourselves. We're living in domesticated cultures. And there are a lot of ways in which we are no longer in contact with our ancestral selves. And so the rewilding is acknowledging that that there's something that we are not connected to anymore. And that thing that we are not connected to anymore is powerful. It's our evolutionary heritage. It is intelligent. And our disconnection from it actually has caused us, this is, my bias, a lot of pain.
Yes.
And suffering. And so rewilding is acknowledging that and then going, how do we want to reconnect with that? Again, how do we want to invite those things back into our life, and in my particular case, into our bodies, eroticism, sexuality, relationship, community? How do we want to invite those things back in? And then how?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah. Do we want to? And then how?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you talk about ancestral selves,
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more of like how you
Yeah.
hold that?
Okay. Yeah. So so a little back history about
Yeah,
me.
please.
One of my places of study, one of the places where I spent my time, my BA is in cultural anthropology.
Oh.
So I've always had a really nerdy, curious interest in who we are as humans. Like what is human mean? And from being a kid, even of being like, oh, like this way that we're doing it, it's a way, but it's not the way. um, and so when I talk about ancestral humans, or I'm thinking about humans that are okay. I don't want to get to like my words are going. So
bring them.
So I'll slow down a little bit.
Okay.
So I'll put it this way. We have been modern humans as a species for about 250,000 years, maybe 300,000 years. Okay. That's how long what we consider modern humans to be here.
Yeah.
What we've been doing has been happening for at the longest 15,000 years. And so when I say what we've been doing, I'm talking about like coming in from the savannas, starting to do agriculture, starting to do less communal living, starting to own land, own things, own people, and starting to create structures that we're more familiar with, like cities and empires and that sort of thing. So we've only been doing this for a really small chunk of time
When you put it
compared
in those numbers,
compared to the fullness.
Yeah.
But we evolved in a much different container. And so what I mean by ancestral humans or more wild humans are one is like the parts of ourselves that are still connected with that, because we are.
Yes.
And I'm also talking about current people in the world who are more connected with that. So there are people in the world who are foragers and hunter-gatherers. They are still living like wild humans. There are people that are more indigenous, and their way of life tends to be more wild, and they tend to have very different ways than we do. And they tend to have higher levels of intimacy and connection and satisfaction in their lives, and even this one kind of rocks people's world, health, than we do. We tend to think, oh, we've got it made as modern humans. We've got all this medicine available to us and whatnot. And in a way, that's true, but also not.
No, I know.
So
we're poisoning our soils, and all of that is going in our bodies. And
Yeah. And there are literal physiological things that are happening to our bodies as modern humans that we're suffering from. And even now there are scientists, doctors in the world that are like trying to go back and go, hey, we need to collect these poop samples from hunter gatherers because they've got like gut microbiomes that would be useful for us. And and there's problems with that too. Yeah. But so that's what I mean. That there's a way of being human that is still in us, but again is covered by domestication.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah. And I kind of I'll tack this on there too. It's kind of like when we have like domestic animals. Like we've got dogs. And all dogs are wolves. That's their ancestral wildness.
Exactly.
And we know what a wolf looks like. We admire them. We go, oh my God, wolf, the wolf, the wolf, and then we have modern domesticated dogs, which, range from everything from, bull terriers to pugs who can't breathe and, and all of it. There's something that happens with domestication that ain't good. Or not always good. I don't want to just I don't want to diss us, but and there's something that happens too when things get domesticated and try to go back to the wild. That's difficult. Like if you take a cow and go, okay, you're wild again, be free. And the cow's going to be like, I don't know how to do this anymore.
Exactly.
So there's a quality of that for us too, and that's the gentleness that I try to bring to the work that I do. Of like, this isn't about just like chucking everything. This is about it's a gentle query. Like, what does this rewilding mean to you in your body? And what can your modern nervous system and relationship and sexuality tolerate?
Yeah. That's an interesting language right there. What can your system tolerate? Yeah.
There's a I'm trying to remember what author this was. Maybe it doesn't matter. But he was talking about life in hunter-gatherer societies. And the way he put it was there's a level of intimacy in those groups of humans. There's a way of living that we as modern people would find it difficult, if not impossible, to tolerate.
Interesting, because what would be so confronting about that lifestyle? I know we're going to get to erotic in a moment. This all feels so good. But what would be so confronting to us now to be part of that kind of lifestyle?
Yeah. Well, the key word there is intimacy.
Yeah. Right.
With your group of people.
Yeah.
With land.
Yeah.
With your environment.
You actually have to feel everything that's going on around you and in relationship with the land. And yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think of the rising statistics around how much isolation, loneliness there is in the world at this time. And yet we've created this world where technically we have access to everything.
Yeah.
Except for this one thing and then we know what social media is doing to a lot of that as well, but I digress. Okay, great. So thank you for laying that foundation out. Now I have one more layer that I want to do with you before we just like go wherever.
Okay.
So we talked about erotic, we talked about rewilding, and we've talked about the ancestral imprint that, like, what our roots really are and how that in itself was wild. Because I think some people can perceive wild as out of control. Right. But what we're talking about is like the roots of being intimate and connected with all of life.
Right.
And then there's this whole thing around eros.
Yep.
And so how do you define eros in distinction to erotic? or do you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, those are similar things. I mean, eros. What would that be? I guess eros is the noun of it. Erotic is the adjective of it. But yeah, eros just as that life energy and that quality that we bring um, of aliveness to whatever we do.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. All right. Wonderful. So, oh my God, I'm so excited. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. I want to start with that you've had so many provocative Facebook posts, but there was one, I think it was probably what prompted me to reach out and say, hey, would you like to do this? And the gist of it is basically, I would like to riff on you around what cuts us off from our somatic intelligence and our erotic life. And one of the things you've talked about is colonization. And so from your background, I'd love to have you speak on what do you feel like the implications or what has caused us to be so disconnected?
Do you want me to speak about colonization?
Sure. Yeah, let's start there.
Okay.
Yeah. And how it relates to disconnecting us from our erotic nature.
Yeah. Great. So, so I'll go there. So there are some words that I tend to use interchangeably, and they're not necessarily interchangeable. But anyway, I'm just going to grant myself some leeway.
Please do.
So colonization or colonize. So the other thing I would say because I just spent some time saying we're domesticated.
Yeah.
I would also say that we are living a colonized existence. Okay. So colonization is literally when one group of people, typically a more technological people or agricultural people or centralized kind of government kind of people, they go into a land and they take it. They take the land. They either get rid of the people that are there. They say, this is our manifest destiny, or it's land for people without a land, whatever. They go in, they kick the people out, or they kill them, or they put them to use in some way,
enslavement or something.
Yeah. And then they own the place. There is a quality of being in the body, and below that there's a quality of sexuality and relationshiping that is part and parcel with that kind of system of society. Okay. So for a colonized society to operate, it's got to be very based on ownership, and it's got to be very based on people working in service to the structure or the state or whatever you want to call it. So when that happens, when you need to understand ownership, you need to understand things like who owns what, how do we track that, all that kind of thing. And so you start to have things more like patriarchy. You start to have more things like not only monogamy, but enforced monogamy and strict rules about like who fucks who and how and why and what happens to you if you fuck the wrong person, that sort of thing. Because you got to know. You got to know where things are coming from. So that sets up whole structures where, maybe in less colonized or pre-colonized societies, there's less shame around sex. There's more freedom typically around sex or sexuality. It's not that there's no rules, or every culture has its rules, but it's less like. But as colonization happens, there's just more structures and strictures and tightnesses and strict rules around sex and how you do it. And so there tends to be even, stricter ideas about like things like, what, this is up right now. What is gender?
Right.
And strict rules around like same sex relationships, and all that sort of thing. So basically, there's more control.
Yeah.
And so that impacts our body.
Completely.
It impacts how we move through the world. It impacts how we see the world. It impacts how we see each other. If I'm learning as a person living under these rules and strictures that my sexuality is for this, it's for ownership. It's for creating these small units that we can understand, family in the way that we understand it. Then I'm just gonna look at you. We're not in, in that kind of a relationship with each other, but I'm
Right.
gonna look at you, chances are, in a way that's more about ownership.
Yeah.
It's more about controlling you. It's more about tracking what you're doing, how you're doing, who you're doing it with. And it's about creating the small bubble in which we're going to like do our thing. So that's a little bit. I mean, there's much more, but I'm sort of not losing. Those are the words.
Yeah, this is great. I want to riff on this a little bit more because I feel like what you're really pointing to is as things become colonized, there's the structures and rules, and what's happened to us is that we've started to fit in those boxes because we didn't have a choice. It was just the way that the structure started to get built around human populations,
Right.
at least in the cultures that we live in the modern day.
Right.
And yet, yeah, go ahead. You're going to say something.
Oh, and I was going to say, and I think the weird part about it is like we think this is normal.
Exactly.
Like when you're living in your paradigm, you don't really you don't see it as a thing. You just see it as the way things are.
Yeah.
And so when people are given something else or shown something else, like how we're doing it isn't necessarily the way it needs to be. It feels very threatening. But it's also like, oh no, we've been patriarchal, monogamous, sex controlling weirdos since we were in the caves, and they show the pictures of, like the quintessential like caveman hitting his mate over the head with a stick and going, "Oh, you're mine." It's like, that's us.
Yeah, that's us.
It's not them.
Yeah,
that's us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so humbling to feel like it lives in all of us. And yet, and when I think, and I'm sure this is true for you, whenever I'm doing work with clients around erotic, one might think it's going to be all sexy and fun, but actually the depth of the work is really around attachment, but it's around shame. Yeah. And it's around the sense of, especially if someone's trying to open a relationship, like that's a whole other level of, especially it seems like, and I'm curious from your perspective, but I know all genders experience jealousy and trying to come out of that process of, but you're mine, you can't be with someone else. Like that's threatening to me. It just feels like I've noticed that's a really big struggle with some of the male clients that I have, of just feeling so guilty about not being able to. And I think it's true for women too. And I haven't worked with any non-binary people yet in that process, but how tricky it is to acknowledge the way this is wired in us. And it doesn't mean we're broken. The jealousy and all of that, it just means we've been indoctrinated into a script where it doesn't feel safe to share. It doesn't feel safe to open our body to one person necessarily and then to another based on these constraints that our psyche has been given. And so, yeah, I guess I just wanted to speak to, maybe we could take this to that, just the larger question of what causes us to lose our wildness around our erotic energy. And then what are we doing to repair it? How do we come back into reclaiming it? So anything you want to say? Those are really general, big questions. But I think we've said so far, one thing that loses is shame, all the messaging, the colonization. And what else do you feel like is creating?
Well, another word I want to bring in to grouping of words that you said is the word grief. You know, when I do this work for myself, when I work with other people around this, and people don't necessarily expect it. Yeah. But when you start to rewild eros, when you start to challenge maybe the way that you want to do this, there's grief there. Yeah. And to me, it's the ancestral and generational grief, and also the current grief of when it's like, oh, the way that I've learned about this, not only have I been doing it for a long time, and it's actually giving me pain, but it doesn't have to be like this. Yeah. And so one of the things I will say with people that I work with a lot is that grief and eros are actually very tightly woven together. They're like cousins, and they hold hands. And so sometimes I talk about it like one thing. Yeah. Grief eros, or erotic grief. Yeah. Almost like space time. Right. They walk together a lot. So I wanted to throw that in too. Yeah. It's a big thing. I mean, for myself, when I, started to have that realization of like, oh wow, all these things that I have felt shame around, or felt tight around, or this way that I've done my life for decades. There are other ways that are less painful. Yeah. Or that are more pleasureful. And they're not wrong. Yeah. It's just what's true for me and what's true for the people that I'm with. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm so glad you brought this piece in, because, and this is part of the conditioning, grief doesn't go with erotic. It's like erotic's supposed to be just pleasurable and good. And yet I can attest to the fact that, and every partner I'm with, I just kind of have to educate some, where it's like, I'll have multiple orgasms and then I'll just start weeping, like weeping. And in the beginning, I was like, what is that? Inside I'm thinking, why am I crying? And I don't know. I still don't know. I just know that it's energy moving through, and that there is something about that kind of aliveness that elicits grief. Yeah. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to, do you have a sense of what that, like, is the grief moving things through from the ancestral line? Is it like, I mean, it's such a general question, but what is your experience of what the grief is informing us of through the body in that way?
I think, I don't know if it's that exactly. I think grief just needs to move. Yeah. And, we're talking about colonization. That's another piece of more colonized types of societies, that grief, along with a lot of other feelings, is like pushed down. Yeah. We don't want to grieve. Yeah. And we try to like, are you done with your grief yet? When something happens, totally. It's seen as an impediment. But grief needs to move. Yeah. And in people, especially that haven't done a lot of moving of grief, which is most of us, it comes up in very powerful experiences. You said I can share whatever here?
Please.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just like, ooh, watch it. So I had an experience in the recent past where two lovers of mine and myself were decided to be together all at one time. Yeah. Wow, and I was sort of I was the hinge in that particular thing. And they decided to pay a lot of loving attention, both physically and verbally, to me in that encounter, which I think most people go, oh my God, that's amazing. And it was amazing, but it was hard to take.
That's what I was thinking.
It was hard to take.
Yeah.
And so I had to regulate it. And there were times when I was like contracting in and pulling away, and they're very smart and astute, and they're like, stay with this. Can you take it? Can you take it in? And it was very playful, but I would call that grief.
Absolutely.
That,
yeah.
I'm like, this is too much. It's hard.
Yeah.
And the practice is like staying with it, letting it move. And, in that particular situation, it's like the kind of grief that like moves into play and pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
Not all grief does that, but it's a way that, just illustrating the way in which we tend to think of grief as a thing, to not feel it, or to feel it in a very small way. And I don't even know what the laws are now. Like if like someone dies in your family or your spouse, how much time do you get off for your grief from
probably
work
not much
or whatever? Yeah.
Not in our
much.
culture.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful example, because it also feels like really needing to teach ourselves how to surrender, relax, and receive again after all this colonization, where we've had to be so tight. And I'm thinking just collectively as a species, though, especially those who are being dominated, of just the level of survival in our systems, and people who have, slaves, like that whole period of time. I mean, there's slavery every single century has its own version.
Right.
But I feel like
American chattel slavery.
Yes. Oh my God, totally. And I think of in Hakomi, they call this like a nourishment barrier, when it's like the body is starting to receive something it's been longing for.
Yeah.
And then it hits this threshold where it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I can take more. And in none of this, of course, happens conceptually, because I think that's part of what happens for me when I have those experiences where there's so much pleasure and there's so much connection, and my body is releasing and going through all these waves of orgasms. And then there's this incredible grief. And I guess I just love that we're normalizing for anyone out there that if this is happening, like, let it fucking happen, like, let it happen. And in your example, the generosity and the attunement to track one another for how much are we receiving each other, like that takes it out of just, and we could have a whole talk on this, like sex versus erotic that we started with. But that's such the beauty of erotic, is that level of presence of like, hey, like, oh, don't go away, stay here, like, just calling each other.
Are you with us?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you staying? Do you want to stay?
Do you want to stay?
Do you want to stay?
Even just consensual question.
Yeah, we don't have to.
Right.
But do you want to?
Yeah. Oh, the playfulness of that. That was so good. I
yes,
love it.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here we are, just starting to map out, to be erotic is to be so playful and lighthearted, and also to be in these deep states of emotion, whether it's grief or hitting a threshold of how much we're able to take in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's the willingness to experience the spectrum of all that we feel.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're making me think of another kind of key thing that comes up in this realm, which is there's so much around sexuality that is performative based. It's like that is part of, I would say, the colonization. And people, I feel like, myself included, it's been so much unraveling around these, these ways in which, and I've seen it with a lot of lovers, especially male lovers, less with female, but it just feels like the level of trying so hard to do the right thing. And like, we all do it. And yet it's such a powerful moment, I think, when we catch ourselves to realize, like, we're not we're not cultivating the erotic in this moment, what do we want to do? How do we drop into feeling? How do we
Yeah.
drop into sensing? How do we come back into our bodies and out of our heads? Because I think so much of sex is just driven from our heads. Erotic is from our entire being.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Where would you take that?
Yeah. I'll take it here. That performance, as far as sex and sexuality goes, um, well, first I'll say it this way: I love performance. I love performing. I'm a performer.
Oh.
But there's a difference between that and anxiety.
Good point.
And control.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of sexual performance is around.
Yeah.
So I love to say to people and myself, like, yeah, if you're going to perform in sex, like, fucking do it. but just, have it be intentional. Like, have an intentional performance, whatever that means to you. But what most people mean is anxiety and having to show up in a way that's like expected in some way, whether it's how you look, or how hard you're supposed to be, or how wet you're supposed to be, or how you look from a particular angle, or just all that stuff.
Pressure. Fucking pressure.
And all of it tends to pull you away from the experience, because when I'm worried about like how hard my cock is in a particular moment or not, I am no longer there. No, I'm no longer with. And people notice.
Yeah.
I notice when my partner's not there anymore, or they notice when I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
And then if there's shame wrapped around that, which often there is, then what was erotic or playful starts to like contract in, and all of a sudden, like, again, I'm no longer there. And on top of that, like, usually in shame, there's like defense or something like, so, and that's hard.
Very hard.
That kind of sucks. And, again, it's not like you can just like magically let go of those things, but there's a practice of kind of playing with that, of like, like I just love the normalcy of being an absurd, floppy, goofy human. Like sex is absurd. It's absurd. Like we like take these like bodies and we like put them together and we go, and we make all these weird
convulsing and making noises.
Making noises, hopefully, and making weird sounds, and our faces get funny.
Totally.
And when you can start to like bring that level of just like absurdity and kind of humor into it, that it happens at all, or that it happens in a mutually satisfying way, is just like, yay. It's kind of amazing.
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess that's one of my antidotes to performance and anxiety, and that contraction of like going away, of just a real acceptance of being these goofy, stupid humans, like trying to have pleasure.
Totally.
And that there can be humor in that.
I love it.
And all kinds of funny sounds and smells and
exactly
unexpected things.
Yeah, I really love that is such a good antidote. Just bring the humor and the lightness in. And I also think, as I'm listening to you, to be able to enter a relationship just acknowledging that there's going to be performance tendencies, and what's our desire around that? Like, do we want to slow down? Do we want to catch it? Do we want to name it if we feel it in one another? Because I think often it doesn't feel like there's another option. It's just like, oh, this is how this is. And it's not, and it doesn't have to be. And I think that's the beauty of unwinding with a partner. and having that messy, like, oh my God, I was just going for this and I just caught myself and I was just speeding it up because, and it's like, no, but then I wasn't feeling you anymore.
Right.
Or I'm trying so hard to give you what you want, but I'm not feeling you. To be able to name those things in the moment just feels like that is breaking down back into the wild. Yeah. The wild is our vulnerability. The wild is our willingness to say, like, I don't feel like I'm here right now, or I'm chasing an orgasm right now, or I'm trying to get you to have an orgasm so I feel good about myself.
Right.
All those things, to be able to name them that's, I think, partially how we're liberating also.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And our response often to anxiety and not knowing, or when things are like not going like we thought they would, is to speed up.
Yes.
Is to and I live in a male body, so I think there's gender differences with this along with everything else, but the tendency is to speed up and to hurry, and to get very rote.
Yeah.
If I'm anxious that I'm interacting with my partner, and my partner is not coming or isn't experiencing pleasure like I think they should, or they're getting bored with me or whatever, it's like, oh, like, so this wasn't working, like this will, we like speed up. And we stopped listening, or if my cock is like not as hard as I think it should be, the antidote to that is like speed up and to be hurry up and like hurry up, I'm gonna get this condom on, and
right.
It's like, I want to hurry up and get in there because
Exactly. Oh my God. Listeners, you got to watch the video if you're listening on podcast, because this is so animated. Please switch over right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have felt those things,
Totally.
And the mode of the erotic and the mode of eros typically is slowing down.
Yeah.
The erotic lives in very slow, breathy, spacious places. It doesn't always stay there, but that's where it has a window of showing up.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to support people in too. It's like we are used to speeding up. We're speedy modern animals.
Yeah.
And we want to, and in our speed, we want to fix things, and that fixing usually looks like, what do we need to add to this equation for us to be better, feel better, fuck better, relate better? And often it's like, well, you need to slow the fuck down.
Yeah, exactly. Slow the fuck down.
And go, okay, let your body feel a thing.
Yeah.
And then feel it in connection with someone else. What happens?
Yeah. What's interesting is it just feels like it's no different than on the dance floor, or even when I'm teaching executives how to create emergent teams where you're listening to the emergent wisdom rather than driving in with your agenda. It's the same approach. You have to slow down to stay with yourself and to feel the sensations and to get the insights. And supposed to just, if we move too fast and we haven't done that foundational connection first, and created the circuit, the energetic circuit, or whatever that is, whether it's a business team or in bed with our lover, this slowing down really matters.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, is how I access my emotion. I don't know. I might have ideas of what I want to do with my lover when we start to engage, but I really don't know. And I discover it, and so does my partner, if we allow it to actually reveal itself to us in our bodies, and to be willing to change course. I've had multiple times where we've been like deep in it, and then this partner, we're not together anymore, but he would just stop and be like, I just need you to hold me. And he's like inside of me, and we're like deep in it. And I'm like, great. And we would just shift. And I learned so much from that level of freedom of deeply listening to our bodies, and then what would come next. And it was always the most profound intimacy and lovemaking. It was just so different than the kind of sex that I've known so much throughout my life.
Yeah. What happens when we stop trying to get someplace?
Yeah.
Yeah. And be, and what happens when we like are attuning?
That's it.
With each other.
Yeah.
Because if we're not, I mean, attuning is what most people are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're not attuning, we're doing, or when we're not attuning, we're tending to come in with agenda.
Yeah.
And that's when we're like,
right.
or, you know,
or
the, the other sides of that are just like, popping out, it's like, okay, I'll pretend to be in pleasure right now because it's easier than making the thing happen that I would like. Mm-hmm. Or I'll pretend to come because that's easier than pausing or stopping. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then just relating it back, because we're also talking about colonization.
Yeah.
I like to link things up, not attuning and getting more in agenda mode. I mean, to me, that's about taking, and it's similar to that idea of like, I'm going to take this land. I'm going to see this land as resources that I do shit with. That's for me.
Extract for my benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your pleasure becomes a thing I want to extract because it, makes me feel good or whatever. And I don't want to I don't want to disrespect like feeling joyful at my partner's pleasure. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I get off on my partner having pleasure.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing it in a way that's anxiety based and less about like what's really working for you, and more like, I'm going to do this thing, and if I don't do it right, then I did something wrong. How you doing? Are you there? Are you coming?
No pressure there for anybody.
Yeah, that does not feel good.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a really good distinction, and you brought that up a few times. It's just like, even with performance, it's like, when are we moving from anxiety, and when are we moving from, whether it's speed or anything else that doesn't have this agenda or this drive, but it's more of like this open curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Or, what do you say in improv or anything else? It's like, you can come in with an agenda, because that's, we have ideas of what we would like.
Fair.
But are you willing to drop it at a moment's notice when it's not appropriate, or that's not how things are going? Yeah. Are you willing to let go of that? Like, I have this idea, like, hey, being inside you right now seems like the thing to do. Mm-hmm. And maybe both of you are like, yeah, that's the thing. But something happens and it's not the thing. Yeah. Okay. Can we let go of that in the moment and go with like, what's actually here? Yeah. And that's attuning.
It is attuning. I'm so glad you just brought that back, because I think I've often heard like, oh, I shouldn't have expectations. And it's like, well, we're going to have expectations and we're going to have agendas. It's just what we do once we get in the river with each other, mm-hmm. and what we're willing to let go of or surrender to or yield from as needed. Yeah. 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 Okay. I want to just pivot a tiny bit to, sure. I've been hearing, and I've been experiencing this myself, but I've been hearing this a lot, especially, it's starting to soften a little bit, but as things have been unfolding in the United States, I've heard a lot of people like feeling guilty for having pleasure or joy, mm-hmm. or feeling good. And they're like, oh, but all this is happening in the world. And I want to just like riff on that with you for a minute about the power of pleasure and the power of guilt. I mean, all of it. Yeah. It all has its big influence. So maybe starting with the question of, how does pleasure play a role for us when we're in chaos and distress?
Yeah, it's a big question, and it's a good question. And I'll answer it the best that I can. So I'll say this, that, we are animals. maybe I didn't say this before, but we are animals. We are a species of apes.
Mm-hmm.
And we are subject to the physiology of animals.
Right.
So when animals are under stress and in duress, things like pleasure, things like sexuality, things like the patience and the quality of presence that it takes to attune with other beings is much lessened.
Mm-hmm. The brakes go
Um,
on.
the brakes can go on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a naturalness to having less pleasure when things are hard.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the way people get around that is dissociating from the things going on.
Yeah.
If you're privileged enough, if you're comfortable enough, that's easier to do. So, some of the stuff I see right now, there are people with whatever levels of privilege where they don't have to feel the chaos as much, or they choose to, and then they seem to be having more pleasure or being able to talk about it from that level.
Yeah.
But the way I feel into it is that when we are under duress, like we are right now, it is important to have pleasure be a practice that you integrate into your life.
Yeah.
And that it's not necessarily an easy practice right now, but it's an important one. And I think it's an important practice, not only for its own sake. I mean, pleasure is good in its own sake, in its own right. But pleasure helps us to stay engaged with life in more useful, positive ways. And so let's say you're an activist of some kind, and I talk with people. Well, I consider myself an activist, but there are people that are way more like on the front lines or doing more, just. And oftentimes what people that are more in the activist side of things, will go into is like, I don't have time for pleasure. I mean, not necessarily in those words, but, and I will say to them, please make time. And understand that it will, I think Dan Savage said, do you know Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his podcast called again for listeners? It's like Love Savage?
Savage Love.
Savage Love, yeah.
Yeah. In the morning we protested, and in the afternoon we fucked, and in the evening we ate dinner, and and then we slept, and then we went out and we protested again, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important because, like in the work that I'm interested in, which we're talking about colonization, I'm interested in decolonization of the body, of our relationships, of our culture. If you don't have a pleasure practice, if you're not approaching decolonization work that includes pleasure, you will tend to recreate the structures of colonization in what you produce. And we don't want to do that.
Wow. Okay, let's say that again. That's fucking powerful right there.
Yeah, if you don't have a good relationship with pleasure and the body, and pleasure in connection and whatnot, you will tend to recreate oppressive structures. And so it's not only a good idea, I consider it vitally important to have pleasure practices, and in particular in these times of stress and duress. And I think that the skills that we have, the somatic skills of living in our bodies and having access to our bodies, pleasure, grief, all of it, those skills of being able to do that without divorcing ourselves from feeling are the same skills that are part of resistance, that are part of standing up. I didn't say this word earlier, but I talk a lot about erotic sovereignty. Erotic sovereignty and sovereignty in terms of liberation are to me, they're the same damn thing.
Yeah.
So that's the importance. That's the importance to me. Colonized culture is very much based in it's antagonistic, actually, to eros.
Well, it feels like it's based in work hard, work harder, do more, accomplish more, guilt, shame. And inside of that, there's really no room for pleasure.
Yeah. Or it's very specific.
Yeah. Right.
In these moments, in these times, and only in this way.
Yeah. The narrow focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with the pleasure, I like how you just expanded the aperture, because it's like having pleasure physiologically helps our brain chemistry, helps our immune system, whether that's like going for a hike, laughing with a friend, making love, whatever it is, fucking, whatever that is. But then there's the pleasure is like the ground from which we're creating from. And if we don't have that ingredient, we could likely be reinforcing structures and patterns in our own psyche and in the systems around us that have that, I don't want to say power over, but basically have that limited, kind of the way you were framing colonization, have the sense of agenda, controlling, and all of that. So it feels like, and there's probably other layers of the strata for why pleasure is so important.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, to your point, it's one of the first things to go out of the window when our mammalian wiring activates and we're in some sort of psychological threat or physical survival.
Right.
And so I would love to transition into, I want to hear a little bit more about your work.
Yeah.
But before we go there, maybe it's a segue. When you talk about pleasure practices, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So it does segue.
Yeah.
So, one of the foundational pieces of the work that I do, it's not all of it, but so, I educate, I talk about, I invite people into understanding what I call erotic sovereignty.
Yeah.
As I was saying. And to me, that is the understanding that we're in these bodies, and that our experience in these bodies, and in particular the eros in these bodies, is very old. And it belongs to us. So I'll speak from the I, like who I am as an erotic being, as an erotic creature. It's older than any relationship I've been in. It's older than the family that I grew up in. It was with me as I developed in utero. We have an erotic personality.
Yeah.
And it's been with us. And I illustrate it this way. When I think about children that I have known, or you think about children that like. They all have like their individual like spark that they bring.
Filling with it.
Yeah. So it's old, and it's mine, and it's yours. And from birth, depending on the family that you're in, the culture that you're in, but often, we're talking about our culture and our families, we're often taught to deny that.
Yeah.
Or to sculpt it in weird ways. And then when we get more relational, we're taught to do it in weird ways. So erotic sovereignty is about reclaiming this body is mine, this pleasure is mine, this arousal is mine, this orgasm is mine, these fingers, all, this is mine. Not in a selfish and mine, just like me. No, it's this literally belongs to me. When we get relational, it's then it's this belongs to me, and then that belongs to you, and then how do we play with these things together. But in terms of pleasure practice, developing erotic sovereignty is about, okay, then how do I play with my pleasure? How do I play with my own body? And so I talk a lot to people as a foundational practice of developing a self-pleasure practice.
Yeah.
And people hear that and they automatically think masturbation. And I'm like, maybe that's part of it. I love masturbation. Masturbation's great. But when I think masturbation, I usually think, and I think people think about like A to B.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to have this orgasm experience. I'm starting here. How do I get there? You know, again, great. I do it.
Yeah.
But pleasure, self-pleasure practice is more like A to C to D to F to, it's like, how do I step into my pleasure as I would step into a musical score as a jazz improv musician or as a contact improvised dancer. Like, what happens when I step in and I go, how do I lean into pleasure in ways that are new, curiosity based, interesting, possibility based, less agendaed? I'm not necessarily trying to get A to B. I'm like, what happens on the journey? And then what happens? And it may be very sexual, or it may not. Or it may be all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it depends on the day and the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't get any demerits if you come.
Right. Yeah.
But you don't have to.
Yeah.
But it really pokes at people because, when people hear the word pleasure, most people go, yeah, pleasure. I would love pleasure. But we also, again, in colonized culture, there's some really strong negative assumptions about pleasure. Like you don't pay it. It's selfish. You don't pay attention to that. You don't put it on the front burner and go, I'm going to like pay attention to this for whatever, an hour or whatever. We don't do that.
Yeah.
Especially if it doesn't have a goal.
Right.
How's this going to increase my productivity? I don't know. Maybe it will, but shut up.
Right. Yeah. There's always something else to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But to prioritize that.
Yeah. So anyway, you were asking about
beautiful.
pleasure, like what are the practices? That's one of them that I usually begin people with. And then we see like what happens when we do that.
Yeah.
There's usually, there can be a lot of playful, cool things. And there's usually other stuff too, like resistance and boredom and shame and a lot of stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's part of the thing.
Yeah. And I was just going to acknowledge the importance of that, because if we don't spend the time with our body, whether it's seeking pleasure or just connection with ourselves, we don't get to bump into these places of holding and protection. And then we don't get to liberate them if we can't see them and have relationship with them. So it does feel like you're basically asking people to walk into the unknown of the mystery of who they are.
Yeah.
And to be willing, and it's courageous to do this because we don't know exactly what we're going to find, but we know we want more intimacy.
Yeah.
And so I know you bring in sexological bodywork. And just maybe for listeners who don't know what that is, maybe just say a few words about that. Because it's such a profound and beautiful practice.
Yeah.
A body of work.
Yeah. So, and I'll say to people too, it's like everything else at this point, it is Googleable.
Yeah.
But so I'm just saying that. So like, if you hear me say it, you can also like look for it. I mean, it's
sexological bodywork.
Yeah. But sexological bodywork is a client-centered practice where hands are on. My hands are on the bodies of my clients, and it's always consent-based, and it's always client-centered. In other words, since we're working in the realms of sex and sexuality and eros, that energy can be present.
Yeah.
But but I always like to make it clear with people that it's not for me. It's not for the practitioner, even though I'm there, I'm involved, and my energy's there too. It's the difference between that and just having a sexual experience with a person where it's like exchange. It's for the person's learning and their growth.
Yeah.
Now some people can hear that and they'll be like, yeah, whatever, and especially since I'm a male practitioner, there can be a lot of doubt or dubiousness about what that means, but it's okay. But yeah, so sexological bodywork is that, and there are definitely like structures within that, like so things like pleasure mapping can be a part of sexological bodywork, where you are doing educational touch with the client around their erogenous zones of their genitals, and it's like, what feels good where and how. Maybe it's something, there's a lot of people that don't know much about their bodies.
Yeah, because we're not taught to explore it.
Right. Or they get in a very particular route about how they experience things, but they've never gone to these other routes. So pleasure mapping is about that.
Beautiful.
And then what happens when we touch this part of you, like maybe the left quarter quadrant of your clitoris, or the perineum, or the bottom of your scrotum, when you're at a level 1 of arousal versus a level 3 of arousal. What's that like? Oh, it's very different. Yeah. So that's good information.
Yeah.
To know. Have you felt that before? Did you know that? No, I didn't. Yeah. So it's just good to know. So that's sexological bodywork from where I come from. That's that's 2 minutes of talking about it.
Yeah, no, I know it's so comprehensive, but it's hands-on, and it's and it's helping people open up to whatever aspect of their own sexual being, their sovereignty. To use your term, the erotic sovereignty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say about it too, in terms of the work that I do, is that I don't do sexological body work with everyone, because it's not appropriate with everyone. It's and it's a developmental sort of relational process with people that I work with. Like what makes sense here?
Yeah.
That
feels important.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were going to say more about that?
Oh yeah, just what makes sense here from a what's wanted standpoint, from a gender standpoint, from a trauma and history standpoint, from a what are you sort of developmentally ready for standpoint. Sometimes people come to me and my words to them are like, oh yeah, it sounds like you haven't done the maybe the counseling or psychotherapy work yet. That would be more beneficial to where you're trying to get to before we're touching base with each other. Or maybe it makes more sense for you to work with a different gender practitioner, because the stuff between genders is like too much right now, either from the negative side or even from the positive side. I've connected with people, and it's not that there shouldn't or can't be like an attraction between practitioner and client. That's fine. It can be helpful. And I've also had it be like the it's too much,
right?
I'm not like trying to like toot my own horn or anything like that, but
you could toot your horn.
Yeah, but it just happens that there's too much charge there.
Totally.
And it's like we couldn't do like we're not going to be able to do the educational piece because you're going to be like too charged.
Yeah.
So there's that too. So anyway, lots of things to think about.
So many things to think about. And ultimately what this is really about is feeling.
Yeah.
It's about coming home to feeling. Earlier you said something, I can't remember what part we were in, but you did this like circle with your hips, and you were talking about
how I did?
Yeah, you did. And it was about the grief and like moving things through the body. Like you said, some people haven't moved things through the body, and then you said most of us haven't. And I think that's ultimately, when I think about my own erotic nature, I think about my relationship to feeling, my like interoception, that sense of knowing my experience from the inside out and being with my body. And it can be so distracting to go straight to exploring things around sex if we haven't done that work of understanding our psyche and understanding how things are mapped in us and how we are operating in the world. And I mean, there's no linear path, but I'm appreciating, kind of sequencing back through. And as I'm saying this, see if I'm missing anything, if there's any other topic we want to touch. But it feels like the beauty of opening up about what the difference between erotic and sex, and then this whole erotic sovereignty and the colonization and the very innocent ways that we as a collective human species have lost. Well, not all, because there's some indigenous, there's some that are still very connected to this intimate level of being in connection with everything in a very harmonious way. But that there's a way that we're all, those of us that are not in that, are learning how to unravel. And we're having to learn that through anxiety driven behaviors, whether that's performative sex or other parts. And that there are antidotes. And the antidotes are various things around, the laughter, like the part of I guess it's like the antidote is the components of eroticism, which is the playfulness, the humor, the going into the full spectrum of emotions, allowing ourselves to feel pleasure, the experience of you with your two lovers and recognizing they were also recognizing, the three of you, that you were hitting a threshold and they were asking you to relax and surrender. It's like this level of being kind of midwifing each other as lovers, as friends, as colleagues, however we're doing that, to surrender into receiving the mirrors and the beauty of attention, affection, love, pleasure, and slowing the fuck down in order to actually know what's going on inside of us and to be attuned to one another. Anything else in terms of like mapping this erotic piece that comes to mind as we summarize today?
Maybe a couple of things. So one is this. I just want to offer that regardless of what kind of human you are, whether you're a modern day domesticated, living in the United States kind of human, or whether you are, a modern hunter-gatherer living on land. Anyway, it's fucking hard to be human.
Fucking hard.
It's hard in different ways, but I want to offer that up because as I talk about decolonization, and when I talk about hunter-gatherers, and I talk about indigenous people, and I don't have the corner of the market on indigeneity. I'm not indigenous. I don't know that land and that life. I just know what people who are that have shared with me.
Same.
But there can be this idea that that there's this ideal, and like, if we were just like indigenous, or if we tried to like live as a hunter gatherer, then we would just be great. And it's like, no. That's not the point.
No.
Yeah, and I just want to let people
that's good
know that. Where I am not going to be a hunter gatherer. It's too late. It's too late. We are not going to do that. So, but the bigger thing is I don't want to idealize the lives of those people. and have it be like another way for us to sort of, to dissociate from the truth of who we are. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to say that. And there's another piece too. Let me see if I can grab it from what we were talking about. Yeah. It'll come, but I'll throw this in here too. Mm-hmm. And that is, in terms of our bodies and in terms of our eros and sexuality, being who we are and being where we come from, there can be this idea that we're broken. Yeah. So I also want to share that there's nothing about us that's broken. There's only like, what do we want to reclaim and remember? And then the last thing that I'm remembering right now, and that and this isn't specifically about sex, but it is about colonization and decolonization. And I wanted to name for you and for the listeners that process of reclaiming and discovery is different, not only for different people, but it's different for different populations of people. Okay. Mm-hmm. So my experience of decolonizing my life, my body, my sexuality is going to be different as a Black-bodied person in the United States than it is for a person of European descent in the United States, and it's going to be different than a person who is indigenous to the United States. It's going to be different. So we're going to have different experiences because we're coming from different experiences of this experience. Mm-hmm. And that's just in the United States. So then there's other parts of the world. So I tend to work, because of how I work and whatnot, with mostly people from the United States. Mm-hmm. Not always. Oftentimes people of European descent, but not always. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, I'm just saying this because, we're going to have different experiences. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
Would you say that everyone shares the shame and the guilt? It just looks differently of how it lives in the body or lives in their psyche, or no?
No, I won't say that as a wholesale thing, but I will say that, people growing up under colonization, whether it's as a maybe a white body person that has maybe benefited more from these systems, and Black and indigenous people that have not benefited as much from. Mm-hmm. And I want to say this: no one's benefiting from
fair.
This shit.
Yeah, fair.
But anyway, but your question was about shame. I'll say this. Shame is the quiet intruder, not always quiet, that's there for most of us. Mm-hmm. Around these things. Yeah. And shame. So I lead this experience called Dance Eros, which is an erotic, inclusive, ecstatic dance, which has this whole like structure around it about, anyway, this whole thing. But what I love to say there, and other experiences too, is we'll step into this thing, and oftentimes we'll have these amazing experiences or like this new thing. It's like, oh wow, what's it like to have permission to like, I would say to people after we're done and later that night or the next day, just know that you might have shame. Yeah. And it might not even be nameable as that. It might be a headache. Or it might be like repulsion, or it might be like, oh, like this thing I did, why did I do that? Or whatever. It could be a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But just know that shame is often there, and we have these upper limits of what we're supposed to experience. And when we push against those, the culture comes in, or the internalized culture comes in and goes, that was a lot.
Yeah.
You need to,
let's get you back in that little
let's
box.
get you back in there and continue being productive and serving the state.
Right.
That's what we need you doing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That feels like a beautiful way to wrap this up, of just
serving the state.
No. No, I do not want to wrap things up there. Fuck that. No, I know, just kidding.
Yeah.
But just this notion of, as we expand into new experiences, or as we discover levels of freedom inside of ourselves, there often is a flip side that comes, whether it's the body releasing something through a headache or digestive issues or whatever the next couple of days, or it's psychological and we can see the content, that's just part of the process. And why containers and being able to talk with others about this is so important.
Yeah.
So, okay, in closing, you're going to one of my favorite places on the planet. I used to live there. You're going to be teaching at Esalen, which is very exciting. And I wanted you to share with listeners just a tiny bit about that, and then anything else you want to share about your work. And we will have your website and how to find you on Instagram and Facebook in the show notes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of May 30th through June 1st, I will be doing a weekend workshop at Esalen. The title of the workshop is The Rewilding of Eros, which will have a lot of some of these things that we've just been talking about. So it'll be a combination of education, but experiential work.
Yeah.
So it'll be a weekend deep dive at the somatic level into some of these things I'm talking about. The workshop's actually full. But there's
amazing. Great.
Yeah. But there's a waiting list for it. So if you go there and you're interested, put yourself on the waiting list. There's still a little while to go, so I'm sure things will do what they do. And I want to let people know too, even though we've been talking somewhat frankly about sex and sexual experiences, it's not going to be a sexual workshop. In other words, there's not going to be open sexuality there, or even nudity in the workshop. So I just want people to know that.
That's
so
good.
They can go, I kind of want to do that, but am I going to be naked?
Yeah. That's a good thing to clarify.
Yeah. So that's coming up, and I'm super excited about it. And then later on in the summer, these are things they're not out yet, but if you follow me, you'll be able to find them. So in August, I'll be doing the Rewilding of Eros workshop in Portland.
Okay.
That will actually be contain more sexual pieces. So that dance Eros will be in there.
Nice.
I also lead a self-pleasure circle.
Okay.
In there, it's community self-pleasure. That would be part of that workshop. So follow me and you'll see those announcements.
Perfect.
And also in Eros, I'll be doing a combined workshop with another amazing being. They're called Z Griffs.
Yeah, I know.
And and we collaborated. They produced it, but I was part of a team that collaborated on this film called Grief and Eros, which is also based in the traditions of Sabanfu Same.
Okay, yeah.
So we did the film, and the film will be part of a weekend workshop that we co-facilitate, and that'll be in August as well, in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
So, and that's not. I say will be. We're still
logistics. Yeah.
In the logistics of that, but that'll be known and up soon.
Okay, great.
So that's really exciting.
That is so exciting. Is this film public?
No.
Okay.
The film. So I'll just say this quickly about the film. The film is amazing. A group of us got together and this like week-long village building thing that was filmed. And we explored eros and secure attachment, and race and gender, and just did all of our work around that. And in the making of that, Z discovered, oh, this is good for people to see and experience, but it's too much to be just like, oh, here's a film to watch. It's more like
it needs to be digested in community as well.
It needs to be held.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what has become of this
beautiful
project. Yeah.
Way to listen, Z. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so everything can be found in the show notes on you, and I will be staying tuned on your offerings. And
Yay.
Thank you. It was so lovely to be with you. There's 1,000 threads we didn't follow that I was like, oh, we could go there. But of course, it's going to be that way on this topic and with someone like you. But
we get to the threads that we do.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you for being here. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Until next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor.
It's been a joy talking with you.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye.